Hello, Instagram family. I feel called to pop in today to offer some suggestions on self discipline and talk a little bit about my own journey with this. So, I realized the other day that actually a lot of this shock and uncertainty of the world and the future um, isn't really hitting me too hard on a personal level because the way I've lived my life the last several years, I've largely not known what the future holds for me. And I've taken a more unconventional path since leaving my 9 to 5. And so I feel like I have some things to offer because, although I am dealing with my own COVID story and my own things, what I can offer is some ways to help you relax and focus on your artwork and your passion and create more ease in your day-to-day life, especially at moments like this where things are just totally uncertain and it's really shocking. This is a familiar concept to me, and largely from my 6-month period of unemployment that I spoke about in one of my last videos. I just want to share my experience, and yeah, I hope it resonates. So when I left my job with nothing lined up, this was all voluntarily, and I had to kind of figure out what to do with all of my time. I had 6 months of not knowing what the future held for me. I had no idea if I would be hired tomorrow, or, I was facing tons of rejection and then getting really, really hopeful and then getting let down just in terms of like finding a job and figuring out my life. I didn't have a lot of savings. I had saved like 3 or 4 grand, but that's, my rent even just per month is close to 1,000. So I had to get really, really resourceful, and I also had to make sure that I was taking care of my mental health and coping with the shock of me just entirely shattering my reality. So a couple things that I did every single day to help me were, for one, making my bed in the morning, making sure my apartment's clean, and also just getting dressed and putting on my makeup and starting my day, really, because psychologically when we're getting ourselves ready for the day, getting out of our pajamas, even though we can stay in them all day, I at least in those moments, and still actually the last couple weeks too, I feel a lot more awake and ready for my day when I'm doing things like that, and I feel much better about myself. So if some of us are finding ourselves in these places that are a bit darker and we're emotionally feeling less stable, something like that is super small, but it helped me a lot. Another thing that helped me a lot was having a mindfulness ritual. I talk a lot about this in my classes, but you don't have to meditate every day, you don't have to do yoga every day, but you do, I would suggest, because this is what worked for me, finding something to come back to every day for like 10 minutes or 5 minutes to just, because the thing is, beyond all the chaos, if you can find one aspect of your day to be consistent, it creates such nice balance and centering and grounding. And so for me, it was meditation, and I was experimenting with all kinds of meditation at the time, but ultimately just discovered that my own flow was 10 minutes of putting on my favorite meditation music and just sitting there and seeing what came up and just making that my goal every single day. And another thing I did was attend community circles once a week, and this was super crucial because on top of all of the work I was doing on myself and just managing my own time, it felt really, really good to go to my Diksha circle, which is a oneness blessing from India, and it was every Thursday night at 7:15 to 8:15, and it was something that I could always depend on. And I think the reason it made such a difference is because it just allowed me to be held and supported, and it was being held and supported through community as opposed to just my partner or my best friends or whatever it is a different kind of vibe. Sometimes, and this is another thing I learned, because I was in a space of not really, I had chosen this path of just leaving everything behind, and a lot of people that were close to me I found didn't really approve of it. There was not a ton of support from certain people in my life that I had expected support from. And so I started just changing my energy and reaching out to those who I knew really, 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 really supported what I was doing and were there and actually had the mental space too to hear me and listen and be there. And so it wasn't to say that I just like let a bunch of people from my life go. It was just that I had to become conscious of who can I actually share this information with, because we don't have to share everything about what's going on with our internal world with everyone else. And I think it's a worthy conversation to have with friends and people that are in our support systems, to also make sure to consent to seeing, hey, are you open to hold space for me for a while, or to, asking others for permission and just honoring each other's boundaries and space right now, because we're all dealing with all kinds of different things. And so it's nice if one of my friends comes to me and says, hey, I really need to talk about this one thing. Do you actually have space for this? Or, hey, like, you can also say, I don't really have space for that right now. I'm working with my own things, but like, here's some resources, or here's what I would suggest, or let's chat tomorrow, or, something like that. So I was really cautious of my support system and really conscious of who I was speaking to when I was going through these times of uncertainty. So those are just a few things. There's a lot here. I had to really get creative with my resources, and so I stopped obviously going out and spending hundreds of dollars and drinking and partying and all of these things. I kind of just I couldn't afford it, and I started to cut back on the amount of money I was spending just in general, but also it led me to veganism. So I'm not saying everybody has to be vegan, but it was nice to kind of get creative with my meals. And I couldn't afford meat and I couldn't afford dairy because those things are usually more expensive, and I didn't really like them to begin with in the first place. So it was an opportunity for me to actually just change up my diet and get creative with how I was cooking food and get more familiar with like the nutrition I was putting into my body, and also save money and kind of work through how to use my resources. And a lot of us right now are already seeing that we don't know when our resources are coming in, or we've gotten laid off, or we've gotten furloughed, and there's a lot of uncertainty there. So it's a really good time to brainstorm what we can do with our resources that we do have. A couple other things that I want to quickly mention are TV and reading. So when I was unemployed, I found that reading a fictional story, or watching a TV show that was also fictional and gave some sort of like storyline, was really a self-soothing mechanism that I could use once in a while, and just sort of dive into a story and forget about my world for a minute. And the reason I say fiction is because I remember actually I tried to read a self-help book when I was unemployed, and it honestly just made me feel like absolute shit because I felt really discouraged. And so I was diving into The Alchemist, I was diving into Lost, the TV show, and just sort of allowing myself to escape for a minute and just be emerging in a storyline and picking up inspiration from there as well, because a lot of these stories follow very similar mythological themes, and they're all related to our humanity and real things, even if they're fantasy based or fiction based. So it's a really, really good way I found to sort of keep myself in check and give myself a break from myself. And also, another thing that was huge for me, and this was so interesting, I was thinking about this earlier, is dreaming big and visioning. So actually taking the time to dream your wildest dreams, and thinking about what I did was just think about how it would feel to live my dream life and what it would look like. And during this time I was doing a lot of YouTube viewing. So I was looking into Envision Festival. I was just dying to go to Envision Festival. And I also found Momentum at that time, Momentum Collective. This was years ago, and at the time I was like, I don't know how I would ever get to these places. I don't know how I would ever do this. But I was just gathering information and gathering inspiration online, just in order to help brainstorm, like, what do I want in my life? And yeah, again, this was all combined with switching off from finding jobs and applying for things and etc. But what I found was that ample time for manifestation. So I ended up going to Momentum Collective a few months ago and Envision Festival. This isn't a matter of like 2 years, and I made it happen because I was planting those seeds of intention, and I was actively meditating on, even though it felt completely far away and completely unrealistic to be going to these places. I had no idea how I was going to come up with the money. I had no idea what I'd be doing at this point in my life 2.5 years ago. And I end up there because I'm putting the intention in, and I'm like just subconsciously even working towards it. So that's I think one of my favorite things about moments of uncertainty is it gives us the opportunity to dream hugely, because we have no idea what's coming. And even if it feels hopeless, it's definitely worthwhile, in my opinion, to dream. So lastly, there's 2 more things. Adaptation and being accepting of all outcomes. So what I learned so much about a few years ago was how, because I was going through a process of going to job interviews, and at first I was really, really optimistic, and then I would be disappointed if I didn't get the job. And then sometimes I would be like, oh, I'm not going to get this, and either I wouldn't, and I'd just be back at square one, or I would get it, and it would be something I enjoyed at all, so I would say no to it anyway. More often than not, though, I got rejected, obviously. So so what I learned from that was how to adapt in situations by not attaching ourselves to the outcomes. We really have no idea what's going to happen. Even some of us who are furloughed from our jobs, we still don't really know how long it's going to be or if they'll be there when we get back. We don't know these things. And so I found that the easiest way to just move through was to detach from the outcomes, because in detaching from the feelings, it's not to say that I don't care whether or not what happens to me, but it is to say that you're kind of in a space of being untouchable at that point. You know, like, I wasn't disappointed either way. I knew that, okay, this job would be great or this job wouldn't be great, but at the end of the day, it didn't really matter, because I had to trust that everything was going to work out, and eventually it did. And as soon as I stopped just being attached to that and accepting everything, I felt so much better about the way I was moving through, and I was so much easier able to listen to myself and what my heart's telling me, and just listen in on the energy around me. And I remember I would go to interviews like 30 minutes early, and I would stand outside of the office and just breathe and just kind of ground myself, listen to my favorite music, and just breathe in the energy of whatever space I was about to enter, and know, like, okay, well, whatever happens, I'll just try, and I'll just keep following the steps of where I'm led. So I let go of the end goal being something, and instead just focused on taking the journey one step at a time. And lastly, this is a little bit off topic, but I actually spent time doing this yesterday. My partner and I decided to completely redo our downstairs area again. It's been like, I think every few months we rearrange all of our furniture and start from square one. And I remember during this time in my life too, we rearranged furniture a lot. And I, at that point, had just started building out a little sanctuary for myself. So in building out my little space with my Zafus, and I didn't actually have those at that point. I had basically nothing. I had books on the floor. I would just sit on a pillow on the floor and just be in my own zone, but just creating a space that was just mine, to be in my own energy, to just do my artwork, to just write, to just meditate, or whatever I needed to do for my own self-care was so helpful. And then also just rearranging space is actually decluttering our minds as well. So when we're rearranging things and we're freshening things up and we're cleaning things out, we're also cleaning out our nervous system, we're cleaning out our bodies, we're cleaning out our minds, we're cleaning out our emotions, and we're using our creative energy in a different way, but that also opens up creative energy for creative energy to flow through in other ways. And that's why we did this yesterday, actually. It was just to kind of keep the inspiration moving and focus more, have our space be focused more on our creative arts as opposed to being our bedroom. We basically have like a big room, and we've just managed to put our own things or our own little studios and things in there for creating, but we've completely shifted the focus to just focus on our art. So there's a number of ways that you can use your space to actually cater to what you need, but just the mere act of moving things around or cleaning things is super, super helpful, or at least that's what I found. But all in all, I think the best part about just having this time, despite how scary it is the opportunity to experiment with what we want and to work with different, if you're an artist, different modes of creativity, different channels of creativity. And I remember I would just spend hours, like I'd be writing and then I'd be applying for jobs, and then I would have to completely switch up everything and switch to like painting. And I'm not like a super great painter, but I was just trying to do something to keep my inspiration going, and always checking in with myself to be like, okay, how do my energy levels feel? I did 6 hours of work this day, so that means tomorrow what I should focus on is just self-care. Maybe I just don't do any work tomorrow, and just sort of tuning in with myself. And you have all the answers that you need within you, but this is just an example of a few different ways that I use all of these little self-discipline things to ease my mind and make me feel better physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to ground me, and just to feel like I am embodied. And we're only responsible for our emotions, and we're also responsible for our inner healing work, and we're responsible for our own paths. So that's why I'm on here empowering you to try some of these things, because they really, really worked. And it is an easy time to just sink into the fear and have those moments of overwhelm, and we all have our bits and pieces of this experience. So just because I'm not struggling with the shock of everything doesn't mean I'm dealing with something else. I'm dealing with my own part of this, and everybody has their piece in it. So I'm just here to offer that as a way to help, and just some space holding for you is all. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know this has been a long 2-part series, but I'll be back on here, and I'm looking forward to chatting more. Love you.